Hello everybody. I hope you guys have all been enjoying my YouTube channel. I thought I would show you how to make a dainty pair of maple leaf earrings, and since it is almost September, October, we're gonna be moving into the fall season, so I thought this would be a fun project. It's very simple. They're very much like this. These are really fun to make. So you will need these are check glass maple leaves. You could use any bead you want, but I felt like using these. I have a bunch of them. Then I have 2mm antiqued bronze daisy spacers and 3mm check glass accent beads here. And then I have 2 ball head pins. There it is. Then of course you want 2 ear wires to hang your pieces on. I'm gonna go ahead and grab mine out because I forgot to grab them. Okay, there we go. So this is a fun project. You will also need your basic pliers, round nose or bail making pliers. I love using these. It gives the loops a more uniform look because these mandrels on these pliers are not tapered. Then your flush cutters and some chain nose pliers. So then as far as the wire, I'm going to use 20 gauge tarnish resistant copper, and we're going to use 28 gauge wire as well. So I'm using antiqued copper 28 gauge and 20 gauge copper. So you want to start with, for the 20 gauge, you want to cut 2 5-inch pieces of wire for the 20 gauge. So 2 5-inch 20 gauge base wires. So I've got my one, and I'm gonna line this up so that I can just make them the same length. The next thing you want to do is straighten out your wire. It doesn't have to be like straight. You just want to get all of the kinks out of it. If you have nylon tip pliers, that is a great tool for straightening your wire. You could also use the handle of your pliers. Basically, you don't want anything like this. You don't want it all wavy and, bent up. As far as using the handle of your pliers, you would just pinch the wire in between there and just kind of smoothen it out. So that's how you can do that with your plier handles. I'm going to use my nylon tip because I just love them. So we're smoothing out our wire pieces, our 20 gauge wire. All right, then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our round nose pliers or looping pliers, whichever ones you have, and you're gonna find your halfway point. And you don't want to completely bend it. Basically, we're making a natural loop, And then I'm going to use the smallest size on my pliers to make that loop. So there we have a small loop. This part's going to be tricky because we want the earrings to mirror. So the wire that is going off to the left is on the top side, meaning it's not behind. I really hope that makes sense. I'm gonna do my best, you guys. I want you guys to be able to make mirrored earrings. So the one that is behind on the back side, I'm pointing it upward, and you can use your chain nose pliers to do so. So that's what you want. The wire on the top, the side facing us, is going off to the left. So I'm going to put that on the left side. Now we're going to do the same thing with our other wire. We're going to make a natural loop, except do the opposite of what you did. So the wire that's now on the left is laying on top of the wire on the right, and it's crisscrossing over to the right side. And I will show you guys both pieces here in a minute. So then at this point, I'm going to bring this wire to where it's facing upward. So if you guys look closely, pay attention to what wires are crossing over what side. This is what you want. This is what you want. And don't get your pieces confused. So we're going to work on the left earring first, which is the one in our left hand, which is the wire going off to the left. We're going to slide our bead on, just like this, till it hits that loop. Now, you don't have to do this portion of adding the 28 gauge wire, but I would like to do that. So I'm grabbing my 28 gauge antiqued copper. You don't need very much. If you really want to cut it off of the spool, I think you're good with, 10 inches to be on the safe side. So what I'm doing is I have my earring piece and I'm flipping it over. I'm just rotating it, keeping my loop facing the same direction. And I'm gonna hold my 28 gauge and I'm gonna coil over this piece of wire. And you can do this first, obviously, before putting the bead on. There's no right or wrong way. But you wanna coil as much as how long your bead is. So basically your coiled should be the length of your bead. And I'm making sure each coil is nice and tight, and I'm gonna push them all together so that they're next to each other. I'm gonna keep doing some coiling. Because we want it to reach the top of our focal piece. And we just go around and around and around. I'm pulling a little bit so that my coils are nice and tight. Now I'm going to hold it back this way. The top of our coil should reach right at this bead hole. That's the goal. So I feel I need just a little bit more. You probably don't even need 10 inches, but it's best to have more wire than you think you need in any wire wrapping project, because if you free flow a lot, and you never know what you're gonna do. So I'm flipping it back over like this, and I'm gonna hold. You want your bead to stay flush with that loop. So I'm holding down all of this, and I'm gonna bring this coil up. That's about where you want it to lay. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this 28 gauge wire off. Using my cutters, I'm flush cutting it. Make sure the weaving wire or the coiling wire in this situation, make sure that is the only wire that you cut off. Don't cut your base wire. So now what I'm doing is I'm bringing that piece around the wire that we put through the bead. And make sure it's tight. You can pull it and rock it back and forth to make sure it's nice and tight. And then this piece here, can flush cut it off. And then make sure that pokey isn't, sticking out. So now here, you might have to make your loop more horizontal with your piece. If you're using a round bead, it's not a big deal, but you want to make sure your loop is facing you. So this is what we have. I'm going to go ahead and do the other earpiece. This one is facing this way. So our bead is going on this wire. And then we're going to add our 28 gauge wire. Basically, your starting point where your coiling should be is like at the apex of where the wires crisscross. Woo! And that's what happens when you pull too hard. You don't want to pull too hard, you guys. So now I'm coiling this piece. Make sure your weaving wire, your coiling is nice and tight, nice and flush against each other. You want to make sure you don't coil on top of coils, otherwise it'll create this wonky bump in your earring piece. This might be enough. So I'm bringing it up, holding everything in place. I'm gonna add a couple more, just so that it matches the other one. Okay, now I'm gonna flush cut off my 28 gauge, and I'm gonna cut it down here as well. Another trick you can do, this is called the pull method. You can take your chain nose pliers and grab that end and move this around in circles and just pull it. Sometimes it doesn't always work out in a flush way, but it is very helpful. There we go. So now I'm bringing this across my leaf. I'm holding everything so I can make a nice tight coil with the 20 gauge around that piece coming through the bead. So here we have mirrored earring pieces. So the next thing is we're gonna make our earring loop. Just getting this a little bit tighter. So we're gonna make a wire wrapped loop, basically. If you have accent beads, you can add accent beads if you want. For the wire wrapped loop, I'm gonna use the smallest tapered edge of my chain nose pliers. And remember, pay attention to which side you make your loops to. So this wire I'm bringing off to the left because this is the left earring. So we made a 90-degree angle. Then you're going to take the round nose. I'm going to use the smallest size. And I'm going to bring this wire up and around and over the front side. So then we have that. Then you want to center your loop. So I'm grabbing and twisting the whole loop over so that it becomes centered, and I'm bringing this over even more. So that's what we have. For the right earring, we're going to do the same thing. Take your chain nose, use your smallest tapered point, but bend the wire at a 90-degree angle over to the right side. Basically the side that the coiling is on. Then we're going to take our round nose. This wire is getting bent up, bringing it all the way over. And now I'm taking these out because I was holding them a little funny. I'm going to put them back in and turn this loop so I can center it and bring this wire up so that you have another apex right there. So here's both of them so you can see. Now, it helps to have 2 pairs of chain nose plier to do this. We're going to make the wire wrapped loop. This wire is just out of our way right now, so go ahead and move it. I'm holding the loop and I'm going to coil this 20 gauge. And I'm kind of pulling so that each coil is nice and up against each other. I'm trying to get my camera to focus. There we go. I'm gonna do 4 coils. So I'm bringing it all the way around and I'm leaving it off on the back side. So we're gonna do the same to this one, moving this piece out of our way, grabbing our loop. I'm gonna show you guys how you could do this with 2 pairs of chain nose pliers, because it can be very helpful. Okay, so I'm holding. I'm actually gonna switch because my electrician's pliers have a much better grip. If you guys ever want a pair of these electrician's pliers, they're at Harbor Freight. They're like $8.99. They are tweezer nose pliers and they are amazing. So this is how you can do it with 2 pairs. It's a lot easier. I'm making sure I'm doing 4 coils, just like I did on the other one, so that the earrings come out the same length. So that's what we have. So next, that piece of wire that we moved out of our way, this one, we're gonna trim it and we're gonna leave about 1/4 of an inch. And we're gonna use our round nose pliers to make a loop. Let me see if mine are easily accessible. They might be in my purse, but that's okay. I will just use these things. All right, so with a loop, this is important if you want a nice flush loop. So I'm using the tip of the round nose pliers to grab the tip of that wire. And I'm just using my wrist and I'm rolling the pliers. This pokey end, you basically want it to touch itself. And if you need to, you can take your chain nose and close that loop, but be steady about it. You don't want that pokey end crossing over its own wire. So now we have a nice flush little loop. Then we're gonna do the same thing on the back side. So we're gonna cut, flush cut, leaving about 1/4 inch. And I'm using the tip of my pliers to grab the end of the wire to roll and make that loop. Here, so you guys can see before I keep going. See how that pokey end is touching its own wire? That's what you want to do, because you don't want to feel that. So I'm going to make this a little more flush. There. Then you can use your chain nose to make sure everything's flush. See, you can see those pokies aren't sticking out because they're nice and flush with the wire. So we're going to do the same thing to the other ear wire. Oh, okay. My phone gave me a dying notification. Let me get this back up. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing to the next ear wire piece. You can just cut them both in this case. That's the back one. This one's the front one. Whoops, that was kind of cool. Okay, so grabbing the tip, making a loop. I'm just using my wrist. Now, if your loop is a little bit bigger than your other one, let me check. Oh yeah. So what you can do about this is trim at the end of your loop, but just a tiny bit. So I trimmed it so that I can make it a little bit smaller. And I think that's, for me, that's as good as it's gonna get. I'm gonna make sure this is flush. Then we're gonna go to the back side and make our other loop. If I can grab it, there we go. Okay, and if you need to, you know, you can move the earring bail piece around if it moves on you. There we go. So now we have our two major pieces for this pair of earrings. I'm just kind of making sure everything is sitting nice. So this is what we've got. The next thing we're going to do is set those aside. We're going to grab our head pins and we're going to bead on our accent beads. Typically I use 3 really small beads. So this is what I have. I'm going to make a 90-degree angle with my chain nose. Now, don't skip ahead to the wire wrapped loop on this part. I do that a lot. You guys, I feel like I've done that in a YouTube video. So we're making another wire wrapped loop on the head pin, except before we wrap the loop, we gotta put our earring piece on. So it's the same process. You want to center your loop. Then at this point, you want to put your ear wire piece in that loop, like that. So now what I'm gonna do is hold the loop we made with the head pin, we're gonna coil that. And try to make your coil nice and neat, just like the coiling we did down the side or up the side of the earring. Take your time. If you've never done this before, take your time. It's the best thing you can do when it comes to wire wrapping. Just be patient with yourself. Oop. Okay, so if you're using a glass accent bead, you don't want to make it too tight or you could break your bead or whatever fragile bead you're using. So I'm going to flush cut this little piece and get that pokey tucked in there. This is why I love these pliers, because they're very fine tipped. And then we're going to put an ear wire on. You want to make sure you put your earring on the right way. Really, it doesn't matter because they look good on both sides, so that's all up to you. But whichever way you decide to put them on the ear wire, make sure you put them the opposite way on the other ear wire. Make sure they're mirroring each other, I should say. So now we're going to do our other little accent piece. So I've got my daisy spacer and my little bead and another daisy spacer. Now this one I'm grabbing, making a 90-degree angle, going the opposite direction. I'm going to grab like this so I can bring this up and over. And then we're going to center that loop. You want it to be centered like that. Then before you wrap it, make sure you get your earring part on. Then we're going to hold that loop on the head pin and we're going to do our coiling. Again, just take your time. Make sure your coils are nice, nice and neat and flush. I need to get another pair of these electrician's pliers because they have a way better grip on them. I love them so much. I highly recommend you guys, really. Electrician section at Harbor Freight. Okay, so I think that is good. Now let go and trim this little tail end off. And I'm going to take these and make that little end nice and flush in there. All right, then we add our ear wire. Wrong pliers. Okay. This is what we have, guys. I hope you enjoyed that very, very much. Let me show you something. I get a little ahead of myself sometimes. So when you're opening an ear wire, you want to open it from side to side. You don't want to open it like pulling it apart, otherwise you'll mess up the structural integrity of that ear wire loop. So these are cute. That was a total blast. I do have an announcement. So if you guys are on the Whatnot app, my friend and I, so I run Artisan Alley Raid Train, and they're 30-minute shows back to back with a bunch of handmade artists. Then Tam's Creative runs Artisan Creative Train, which is usually the Monday and Tuesday before Artisan Alley. I will drop the links in the description so you can find us, and if you search either of these trains on Whatnot, they should be able to come up. I very much hope you guys enjoyed that. I definitely enjoyed it. I hope it inspires you. I hope it helped you, and I'm open to any feedback. I appreciate you guys very much, and I will catch you next time.